Picture a typical summer cookout, where someone is 3 plates deep, sweating profusely despite not having moved from their chair. We have all heard it called the meat sweats, a term that has served as a comedic punchline for 2 decades. Yet, this phenomenon has rarely been treated as a serious scientific subject, despite the clear physical reaction occurring in the body. The claim is that consuming high amounts of protein triggers an energy-hungry reaction in the liver that raises body temperature. People have debated why meat heats the body since long before the invention of the microscope or modern medical terminology. At the heart of this process is a specific molecule that the body treats as dangerous, requiring an emergency disposal system. By the end of this exploration, you will see why the foods we typically blame for this heat actually have it backwards. Ask 10 people why the meat sweats happen, and you will receive 10 different, often conflicting, half answers about the cause. Some blame the grease, while others suggest the stomach is simply working overtime, or they just laugh it off as a joke. That post-feast fog, characterized by feeling drowsy and overheated, is not just a symptom of being full from a large meal. There is a specific, measurable biological mechanism occurring within the body that explains this sudden and uncomfortable rise in temperature. The problem is that almost none of the popular explanations point to the real mechanism, and many blame the wrong culprit. However, scientists have been precisely measuring how much heat different foods generate inside the human body for over a century now. This data has been sitting in academic journals this entire time, waiting for someone to connect it to your last barbecue. Let us connect those dots, starting with what people believed about food and heat long before anyone owned a thermometer. Around 2,000 years ago, Greek and Roman physicians believed every body and every food occupied a scale of qualities. These qualities included hot, cold, wet, and dry, with meat, especially roasted meat, being categorized firmly under the heating label. Therefore, a big meaty meal was expected to warm you from the inside, a belief that required no complex biology. This idea survived, more or less unchallenged, for over 1,000 years, shaping how people viewed the effects of their diet. For centuries, nobody actually knew how eating produced heat until scientists developed the tools to measure it with precision. Some historians trace the first scientific notice back to the 1700s, to the chemist Antoine Lavoisier and his experiments on respiration. It took until 1885 for a German physiologist named Max Rubner to finally name the effect and give it scientific weight. He called it specific dynamic action, proving that some foods force the body to generate far more heat than others. All the internet needed after that was one turkey dinner and a sitcom to give the phenomenon a catchy nickname. In a 2001 episode of Friends, Joey Tribbiani ate an entire Thanksgiving turkey, helping popularize the term the meat sweats. Remember that dangerous molecule mentioned earlier? It is ammonia, a byproduct that your body must handle with extreme care. Meat is mostly protein, and protein is composed of amino acids, each carrying a small tag of nitrogen that must be removed. Before your body can burn an amino acid for energy, it has to rip that tag off in a process called deamination. This specific chemical reaction releases ammonia, which is toxic enough that your liver treats it like hazardous biological waste. Consequently, your liver operates a dedicated cleanup line, known as the urea cycle, to neutralize this dangerous substance immediately. Just the first step of this cycle spends 2 whole ATP molecules, the primary energy currency used by your cells. By the time 1 molecule of urea is ready for your kidneys to flush out, the cycle has burned through 4 ATP. Think of it like a hazmat plant bolted onto your liver, working constantly to strip warning labels off incoming amino acids. Any industrial plant running that hard, all day long, inevitably throws off heat as a byproduct of its necessary work. And here is the part that is almost funny. Your body does not even wait for the first bite to begin. The smell of food cooking can trigger digestive secretions before anything reaches your stomach, a reflex studied since Pavlov. Protein is not just harder to chew, it is the one macronutrient that forces your liver into overtime, meal after meal. Here is the practical takeaway. Next time a meal leaves you warm, do not blame the volume of food on the table. Look at what is actually on the plate, because protein is the variable doing most of the metabolic work here. It is not the portion size in general, but the specific composition of the food that drives this internal heat production. This is where it gets interesting, as fat barely registers, using only a tiny fraction of its calories to be digested. Carbohydrates sit somewhere in the middle, but protein demands 20 to 30% of its own calories just for processing. When someone blames the greasy, heavy part of a meal for making them overheat, they are likely pointing at the wrong thing. This realization changes who should actually expect the meat sweats, and it is probably not who you would initially guess. The reveal is that it is not the greasy, fatty foods doing the heavy lifting during your body's metabolic process. Fat is one of the cheapest things your body can process, requiring almost no thermic cost to break down for energy. A lean, dry chicken breast or a protein shake can put more metabolic heat through your system than a fatty steak. This is the part that almost everyone gets backwards, blaming the food that feels heaviest rather than the protein content. The real driver is whichever plate has the most raw protein on it, regardless of the fat or sauce involved. One honest caveat is that nobody has run the definitive study proving this heat spike alone soaks your shirt. The heat production itself is real and measured, but whether it is the whole story remains an open scientific question. It is likely one contributor among several, but the metabolic cost of protein is undeniably a significant factor in the process. So, next time someone at the table swears the ribs are what is cooking them, tell them it is the math. It is the complex math your liver has been running since long before anyone had a word for this process. We have spent 2,000 years blaming heavy food, while the real heat was hiding in the lean stuff. This biological reality highlights how our intuition about food often misses the mark when compared to actual metabolic data. Understanding the thermic effect of food allows us to see our meals not just as calories, but as chemical reactions. So, what is a food myth you have always wanted put under the microscope to see if it holds up? Tell me in the comments below, and it might be the next topic we take apart with scientific scrutiny. Thanks for watching, and stay curious about the hidden processes happening inside your body every single day. The common assumption that greasy or heavy foods are the primary cause of the meat sweats is actually biologically backwards. While people often blame fats for post-meal sluggishness and overheating, scientific data shows that fat is a very efficient nutrient. In reality, fat requires minimal energy expenditure to process, making it one of the easiest fuels for our bodies to handle. When you consume dietary fat, your body uses somewhere between 0 and 3% of its calories to get it processed. This efficiency means that fat is essentially a cheap fuel source, rarely triggering the intense metabolic heat we associate with sweating. In stark contrast, protein demands a significant portion of its own caloric value, sometimes up to 30%, just for metabolism. This high cost is due to the complex chemical work required to break down amino acids and neutralize toxic waste products. This means a lean chicken breast or a simple protein shake can generate more metabolic heat than a fatty, marbled steak. The energy cost of processing protein is so high that it creates a measurable spike in your internal core temperature, while the exact contribution of this thermic effect to a visibly drenched forehead remains a subject of ongoing scientific study. The underlying mechanism is undeniable, as our livers perform complex chemical math during every single protein-heavy meal we consume. By understanding this, we move past the myth that only greasy food causes us to overheat after a large, hearty feast. Ultimately, this reveals the hidden metabolic reality behind our favorite meals, proving that biology is far more complex than it seems. Think of your liver as a high-powered industrial plant that must work overtime whenever a high-protein meal is ingested. Every gram of protein requires this intensive labor, turning your body into a furnace as it works to clear the waste. So, when someone points to the grease on their plate as the culprit for their discomfort, they are misidentifying the source. The real driver of that internal heat is the protein content, regardless of how much fat or sauce is added. This shift in understanding changes how we view our dietary choices and the physiological reactions that follow a big meal. It is not the heaviness of the food that warms you, but the metabolic intensity of the nutrients being processed. Even without a definitive study proving this heat spike alone is enough to soak a shirt, the thermal data remains clear. The heat production itself is real, measured, and consistent with the chemical demands of breaking down complex protein structures. Whether it is the sole cause of the meat sweats or just one contributor, it is undeniably the primary metabolic driver. Next time you feel that post-meal warmth, remember that your liver is simply running the math on your protein intake. 2,000 years of blaming heavy food has finally been corrected by the simple, invisible science of metabolic heat.